Okay, so let's talk kashrus. One of the questions that came up, which was interesting. We'll put this on Do Not Disturb. That's important. There we go. Cool. Okay, so one of the questions that came up with regards to kashrus. This is interesting. There are grills that are outside of the dining room. Those grills, as far as I know, last year were new. If I remember correctly, grill grates need to be toveled, so we took them down to the lake. We toveled the grates, and they were used last summer. Baruch Hashem, all good and well. And then they were covered up. And they were ostensibly covered throughout the season. When we came back this summer, some of the grates were uncovered. Some of the grills were uncovered, with the question that maybe some of the people that work here during the year or getting camp ready for the summer might have used those grills. Impossible to ascertain. We tried to figure out if they were or were not used in terms of by other people, or who might have used them, or if they were used for things that were kosher or not kosher. And thus the question arises, what do you do with these grills? So, Nu, what do you do? No, what do you say?
Get new ones.
Get new ones? So, okay, you can get new ones. That's a possibility. That's expensive. What do you kasher?
How would you kasher?
Oh,
Do you have to would you take off the top? It's just the grill, or?
Okay, so let's talk about how to kasher things in general. This is the introduction to kashering of all things in general. The Torah tells us in Parshas Matos, which is like 2 weeks' time. That's the section of the Chumash that like nobody ever gets to. Just as a aside, interlude, from time to time, and whenever I teach Chumash to boys in general, even girls' high school classes, whenever there's a Chumash class, people say, why do we have to learn Chumash? Didn't we learn Chumash? We were in kindergarten. So aside from the fact that you need to grow as you learn Chumash, and you learn Chumash differently as a 5-year-old, as a 50-year-old, as a 500-year-old, Chumash is always relevant to everybody at all points in time. When people think that they learn Chumash, they usually learned some of Chumash Bereshis, most of Bereshis. That's usually what you learn in elementary school. And then when you get to Sefer Shmos in elementary school, well, no worries. We just started a second ago. So when you get to Sefer Shmos in elementary school, what happens is you do Parshas Shmos, you do Va'ira, Bo, B'Shalach, and then Parshas Yisro, you get to Aseret HaDibros, and then, lo and behold, comes along Parshas Mishpatim. Nobody learns Parshas Mishpatim because that's very complicated, and then you have 5 Parshas, pretty much Shumat Tzaveh, and then Vayakov, because they're all talking about the Mishkan, and you'll usually do like one Mishkan project in elementary school, and then with a brief interlude for the Egel Azav, Parshas Ki Sisa, and then start Sefer Vayikra. Nobody learns Sefer Vayikra because Sefer Vayikra is complicated, but good for everybody is that Sefer Vayikra also happens to be around the time that it's like just before Pesach, so now you get to do the Haggadah, you get to go through all of Sefer Shmos again, and then by the time Pesach is finished, now you've hit Sefer Bamidbar, you learn a little bit, maybe Parshas Ba'aloscha, maybe Parshas Shlach, maybe Parshas Karach, and then it's vacation. And the next time that you see the Chumash will be in Bereshis after Yom Naraim again, which means that when people say that they have learned Chumash in school, what they've learned is a little bit of Shmos, a little bit of Bamidbar, maybe most of Bereshis. Vayikra, nothing, but Dvarim, nothing, and the second half of Bamidbar, nothing. And the raya to that is, the longest parsha in the Torah is, what's the longest parsha in the Torah? Longest laning the whole year is, so Nasa is the longest single parsha in the year, the longest laning of the whole year is Parshas Matas Maseh. Parshas Matas Maseh is the end of Sefer Bamidbar. It is 13 and a half columns in the Torah, depending on your Sefer Torah, but about 13 and a half columns in the Sefer Torah. It's the longest laning of the year. And I'm not going to put any of you guys on the spot, but of that longest parsha of the whole year, think to yourself, do you know 3 things that happened in Parshas Matas Maseh? Most people are like, I don't know, we didn't learn that in school, usually because that's during the summer. So, one of the things that happens in Parshas Matas Maseh is the Jewish people go to war against Midian, they come back from Midian, and they are told about Giulei Klei Midian, how to kasher all of the things that they got in Midian, in the war against Midian. And the Torah tells us that Kol Asher anything that was used in fire needs to be cleaned through fire, and anything that was used with water needs water in order to extract the flavor. And that is the principle of kaboloi kach polto. The way that it absorbs flavor is the way that it expels flavor. Which means that if you have something that is used with direct heat, that's fire, you need to kasher it with direct heat. And if you have something that is used with water, with boiling water, then you would need to kasher it using boiling water. That's the general principle. There are two malachas on Shabbos that are very much related, really the same malacha, but related to each other, that describe these two processes. One is called bishul, that's called cooking, right? And one is called afia, which is called baking. What is the difference between cooking and baking?
Baking is slower. Cooking, I feel like, is like boiling water.
So cooking by definition involves water, right? Baking and roasting does not involve water. So the difference between a roasted piece of meat and a cooked piece of meat is whether it is in liquid or in a fire, right? Is it direct heat or is it through water? Yes? Now, if you're cooking something with direct heat, just in terms of the cooking of it, what is the maximum temperature at which you can cook a piece of meat? Or cook anything. What's the maximum temperature that you can cook anything?
Like 400, like 300, 375?
That's what the oven is set at.
500.
Maximum temperature that you can that cooking happens to an item is boiling point, right? 212, right? Meaning the water cannot be more than 100 degrees Celsius or 212 Fahrenheit, right? By definition, it can't get hotter than that. That's why if you have a melting chocolate, you do a double boil. Why do you do a double boil? Because that way you ensure that you have a consistent temperature. Because the water, once it hits 212, is no longer there. It's evaporating, right? You cannot get water hotter than boiling point unless you're using pressure or you have different altitudes. Yes, you can finagle with it a little bit. But by definition, if you are absorbing flavor through a liquid medium, there is a maximum temperature that you can get to, and that is boiling point. Right? You can never get liquid water hotter than boiling point because then it's steam, right? That's just science. Anybody here doing like sciences? Yes? No? Okay. This kedai to understand, you can't get water higher than boiling point, otherwise it's evaporated. So that's the maximum temperature. If you're talking about roasting, so you can get a grill, a good grill, you can get up to 700, 800 degrees, no problem, right? If it's quality. Right, you can get it up to very, very high temperatures. Very high temperatures. Now, there is a difference between the method of extracting flavor or imparting flavor through direct heat versus a liquid medium, not just in the maximum temperature that is possible, but also the mechanism by which kashering will occur. Let's talk fundamentals here. Let's say that I have a pot. And that pot is kosher, never been used for anything treif, and let's say kosher and parav. Beautiful, excellent, wonderful, gewaldig. And chametz, right? Whatever you want, right? And I want to now remove the flavor from it. So that pot has absorbed flavor through cooking. Yeah? Through a liquid medium. I want to get rid of that flavor. In order to get rid of that flavor, I need a liquid medium to extract it. And the way that I'm going to extract it is by putting it in boiling water. So I have flavor that is absorbed in the walls of the pot. Right? Here's my pot. Flavor is absorbed into the walls of the pot. I am now going to get rid of that flavor that has been absorbed into the walls of the pot. And the way that I'm going to do that is through boiling water. So I take my pot and I put it in a bigger pot. And that is now going to extract the flavor. Where does that flavor go? What happens to that flavor? Where does it go? Into the water of the bigger pot, right? It goes into the water of the bigger pot. So now all that I've done is I've made that water treif or fleishik or chametz or, right? Yes? No? Right, that's a problem. That's a problem. Which is why the mechanism by which kashering happens is called bittul. Meaning that there is now, when I extract the flavor from that pot, I'm extracting it into something bigger, right, in general, and I'm pulling that flavor out, and that flavor is now going to be buttered in something which is 60 times more than the thickness of the walls of the pot, meaning displacement. Ideally, I would take a pot and put it into a boiling vat of water, and it would displace it by less than 1/60th, right? So then it would be greater than, if it would displace by less than 1/60th, then the volume of the liquid that I'm being mevatel, the flavor in, is 60 times greater than the flavor that I'm being mevatel, and that it's bittul and everything is good and well. The flavor has been extracted from my pot, it is now buttel in the liquid that I've put it in. Everybody with me? Good? Excellent. Ideally, if you can kasha in something that's 60 times bigger, then the thickness of the, meaning the displacement, the thickness of the walls of the pot that you are kashering, that's perfect. We don't always have the capacity to do that, especially if you're talking about something very big, which is why we always recommend waiting 24 hours before kashering. Why should you wait 24 hours before kashering? Because after 24 hours, the flavor that is absorbed in the walls of the pot is something which is no longer enjoyable to eat. Right? That's now a tam pogum. And that flavor, which is pogum, which is now been dulled or sullied or is gross, is not going to impart any good flavor into the water. Means that even if there's not 60 times more than that, it's pogum, which means that it's not enjoyable flavor at all. It's going to be able to be mevatel in less water than the 60 times water that you would normatively require in order to be mevatel a flavor. Everybody with me? That's why in general, you wait 24 hours before kashering anything with hagala, which is using boiling water in order to kasher something. So if I have a pot and I accidentally treifed it up, I put fleishiks in it and it's supposed to be a parah pot. So what I'd like to do is kasher it, I'll wait 24 hours, then I will either put it in a big vat of water that'll kasher the whole thing, or alternatively, one could kasher, and this is good to know, with what's called iri kli rishon. What does iri kli rishon mean? You might know this from Hilchos Shabbos. That is pouring from a boiling hot stove, meaning from a kli rishon that has been on the fire, pour directly onto it, and then you don't need to do the whole thing at once. You could do it in parts, right? You could kasher the first half, flip it over, kasher the second half, or you can dip it in boiling water, the first half versus the second half. It doesn't all need to be kashered simultaneously, and this is important to know because it is different than tevilah. If I'm tovelling something, I need to tovel the whole thing altogether. Kashering, you don't need to kasher the whole thing altogether. Everybody with me on this? Yeah.
If you go to if you stay at a place and there's an oven, or I don't know if you can even use a microwave, but can you assume it stays 24 hours? If you want to kasher?
Okay, excellent. Both of those are great questions. The oven is one question, and the microwave is another question. We're going to get to both of those in a moment. Microwaves. We'll start with microwaves because that's the question of hagala, which we're doing at the moment. Microwaves are interesting because how does a microwave cook?
Those heat raise the waves.
So it's not a liquid medium or direct heat, right? What does a microwave do?
It's like the heat bounces off all the walls.
So there's no heat that bounces off all the walls, which is why if you stick your head in a microwave after you've had it on for 20 minutes, the walls are still cool to the touch, right? How does a microwave heat anything up? What it does is it shoots literally tiny waves, microwaves, through the food that heats up the liquid. It makes the molecules in the liquid excited, it heats them up. So if you put a solid, like a totally solid, a zero liquid, in a microwave, it won't heat up at all. Like if you put a dry piece of wood in a microwave for an hour, nothing will happen to it. Because there's no liquid in it, it won't heat up. It only heats up the liquid that's it, which means that a microwave, the only issue that you have in a microwave is an issue of steam. Because when you heat something up, what happens is the steam is now cooking, right? Meaning the steam is now heated up to the point that it is rising out of the food, that is then going to rest on the surface of the microwave. And then, say, I put in a bowl of macaroni and cheese. I heat up my macaroni and cheese. Now it comes out of a steaming bowl of macaroni and cheese. The top of the microwave is covered with macaroni and cheese droplets. I then put in a bowl of cholent that I want to heat up. What's going to happen? I'm going to heat up the bowl of cholent. Then all the liquid in the cholent is going to heat up. There's going to be fleishik liquid that's going to hit the roof of the... There's going to be milchik liquid and fleishik liquid at the top of the microwave, all dropping into my cholent. That's basa b'chalav, that's a problem. Don't do that. So, the easiest way to ensure that that never happens is to cover everything that you put in the microwave. That's the only issue that could ever happen in a microwave, is an issue of steam. Which means that if you're covering things in a microwave, and usually we recommend double covering just in case, but practically speaking, if it's single covered in a microwave, there is no way of an intermingling of flavors at all ever. Because there's no heat that is being transferred from anywhere else other than the food itself. So how do you kasher a microwave? If you want to kasher the roof of the microwave, so you put in a cup of cold water into the microwave, you put it on for about 5 minutes until it has steamed up the whole microwave. And that steam is then going to extract whatever flavor is in the microwave. That's going to boil up, the whole thing is going to steam up. Then you wipe it. Assume that it's clean, right? That's important to know. If there's residue of actual food in the microwave, that's a separate problem. But assuming that it's a totally clean microwave, once you have heated up the microwave, you've heated up the walls, you've extracted whatever flavor through steam that is at boiling point, because that's the heat that you're going to get it to after about 5 to 10 minutes, depending on the strength of the microwave. It's going to extract all of the flavor from the walls of the microwave, then you wipe it down and you're good to go. Recommended practice is once you've done that once, move the cup over to steam up the area that was underneath the cup. Now there is machlokas between Ashkenazim and Sfardim with regards to the glass platter thing that the microwave has that is spinning around. Ashkenazim in general do not kasher glass. Sfardim do kasher glass. And the glass itself might be treif according to Ashkenazim no matter what. So as long as you cover, meaning everything that you put in the microwave is not directly on the glass, which is usually the case anyway, you don't have what to worry about, right? Meaning, as long as everything is covered, you're good to go. Which means that if you get to an Airbnb and you want to be able to use the microwave right away, assuming that the microwave is clean. If it's not clean, call them up and yell at them. If the microwave is clean, the best thing to do is travel with paper bags. Just double wrap everything in your paper bags, put it in the microwave, use the microwave. Nothing wrong with that. Use it for milchiks, take another, heat up your macaroni and cheese, get your paper bags, heat up your cholent, everything's good. Because the only issue there is an issue of steam. Now, can steam kasher? Yeah, steam can kasher because steam will often have the din of boiling water. But the steamers that you get, that people try kasher the countertops with steamers most of the time are not good. Why not? For 2 reasons. One is because by the time the steam hits the countertop, usually it's no longer boiling, right? It's no longer boiling. And 2 is, that's problem number 1. Problem number 2 is that it doesn't cover all of the area, right? It doesn't, you need all the area to be steamed, meaning boiled, steamed. You need all of it, boiling and steaming, all of that to be the case. Now, practically speaking, what that means is that once it condenses onto the countertop as liquid, that liquid needs to be boiling. Most of the contemporary steaming devices that you have today don't kasher, don't get that hot, right? Meaning most of it is not a steam but a hot mist, like the clothing steamer things, or like right? It's not actual steam. It's blown through a fan that's blowing like heated up particles of water. That's not steam. That's hot water vapor. That's a different thing entirely. There are some industrial steamers that are used to like clean things in industry that get that hot. There are some, you can Google that, I think the CRC or the Strong K put out a list of like a couple of different brands that make steamers that are hot enough to kasher things. Most of the commercially available ones like that you get from Amazon are not going to get hot enough for that. In industry, and when I was in Rosh Hashanah, in Chulin, he told us that the way that they sanitize and kasher milk trucks is with steam, but it's very Levitic. Meaning, you know, like those massive like milk tankers? So those refrigerated milk tanker trucks. How do you clean that? Like you have people that get in there and like scrub it, like squeegee it. So in order to clean that, they have what they call a steam bomb. Sounds very Levitic. They take a high pressured, like a canister of like very, very high pressured water, and they heat it up under high pressure, and then everybody gets the heck out of the milk tanker, they close the door, and then they detonate it, a high pressure, high heat steam bomb, and then it explodes at like super heated steam, kills and cleans everything. That steam can kasher whatever you want, right? That is steam that is much hotter than 212 Fahrenheit, because it's under pressure. That kashers gewaltig. That most people don't have that available in their homes. So kashering with, if you're talking about something that you are kashering that is used for in liquid, so you have either through real steam, you could do that. You could kasher something with real steam, 212, or irrigation pouring from a boiling hot kettle, pouring on your countertop with boiling hot water. All of that is doable as well. Or alternatively, with boiling water. That's the best way of doing all of those things. None of that's going to help you with the grill. Why is that not going to help you with the grill? Because that's fire. So how do you kasher something with fire? So this is what the pasuk tells us. Anything that is heated through fire. What time do we have to end today, just by the way? Sure goes until...
45. Yeah.
We got time? Okay, good. In order to kasher a grill, you need fire. You need to get it hot enough that it will be able to expel that flavor. Now, there's an interesting discussion on the postscript. What exactly is the temperature at which we will consider something to be libun, right? Meaning, when is libun? When you've extracted all of the flavor from something using fire. So we have two definitions of libun. There's what's called libun gomer or libun chomer, which is at the point in time that the metal is glowing hot. Now, even at the way that our metals are made today, our metals don't get glowing hot, even at like the highest temperatures that you can get them to safely. They're not going to glow. They're not going to be glowing red hot. Nevertheless, the poskim define roughly the temperature of libun gomer to about 850, 900 degrees Fahrenheit. That is the temperature of your self-clean oven. About 900 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the temperature that your self-clean oven will get to. Now, if you're going to self-clean your oven, that'll kasher anything that's inside of the oven. This is important and worth knowing. You don't need to wait 24 hours between the last time that it was used and kashering your oven. Why?
Got rid of any flavor.
Because the method that libun uses is not bittul. It's not extracting the flavor and then being mevatel the flavor. It is destroying the flavor entirely. Once you put it in the oven, meaning in the self-clean oven, it's going to heat up to the point that anything that's in there is burnt, it's destroyed. Yeah.
So let's say like you have a tin that you want to kasher, like re-kasher, and you only use it for the oven. Let's say like you were also going to do your self-cleaning oven, whatever at the same time. Would you be able to just place the tin?
Absolutely.
Got it.
Absolutely. One of my rabbim in Keren Yavneh told us when we were learning Yerideh, or Silva, he said that he once decided that it would be easy to kasher like all the things they needed to kasher all at once. He put a knife in the self-clean oven, kashered it beautifully. The problem was it didn't have a handle at the end. Meaning the knife is kashered, the handle was incinerated, right? Not there anymore. Probably the oven probably smelled terrible afterwards as well. Meaning you can kasher whatever you want through libun gomer because you are destroying any flavor that is in it. So normatively, when my wife and I kasher for Pesach, we have grates that we have in our sink, right? Meaning the thing that like just catches all the stuff. So, and that's stainless steel. So that is mostly used with boiling water, maybe not even boiling water, in the sink. There's no direct heat that we use with that, but it's just much easier to kasher all of the grates and grills and all the rest of it in the self-clean oven. So we pop that in there and off you go. As long as it can withstand the temperature of self-clean, you're good. You don't need to wait 24 hours because it's incinerating and burning all of that up completely. This is important to know halacha l'maisa, because your question about getting to an Airbnb and using the oven is that question. And this comes up most notably on Pesach. Most notably on Pesach, because anybody here ever been away on Chol HaMoed? If you go away on Chol HaMoed, you end up with this problem. So you're at home for the first day, 2, Pesach, whatever the case is, Shabbos, and then you want to go away for a couple of days during Chol HaMoed. So you show up at your Airbnb or your timeshare, whatever it is, and there's a sink. The sink you cannot kasher because it's chometz day. Why can't you kasher a sink? Because how would a sink need to be kashered? With boiling water, right? You need to kasher the sink with boiling water. Boiling water, that's called hagala. What is the mechanism that you are getting rid of that flavor? Bittul, right? But chometz on Pesach is not batel. Can never be mevatel chometz on Pesach. Which means that if you kasher, let's say you have a chometz stick pot that you wanted to kasher on Pesach. So you take a chometz stick pot and you put it in a gigantic vat of boiling water that's 1,000 times bigger than it. What have you just done? You made all of that vat chometz. Because there's no bittul. There's no nullification of chometz on Pesach. All that it does is make more chometz. So bittul doesn't work on Pesach. Which means you can't be mevatel chometz on Pesach. You can never kasher through libun, through hagala on Pesach. Because there's no bittul. You can never nullify the flavor of the chametz. What you can do, what happens if you find a piece of chametz in your house on Pesach? You can burn it. You can destroy chametz. You can do libun. You can burn it. Which means that if you get to an Airbnb and you want to kasher the kitchen, the microwave you cannot kasher because the microwave is chametz and would require steam in order to kasher it. The sink you cannot kasher. A pot that's used for pasta you cannot kasher. A stovetop, if it's a burning heating element, you can kasher. You just turn that on, burn that out. You can burn off any flavor of chametz that's in there. And the oven you can self-clean. You can burn out all the flavor of chametz that's inside of the oven. No problem. Do you need to wait 24 hours before doing that? No, because you're destroying it, right? You're destroying all of the flavor of chametz that is in there. That is called libun goma. Yeah.
A pot that was used with water, you could put in the oven and use and burn.
Now, there is a discussion in the poskim whether a higher degree of kashering will work for that which requires a lower degree of kashering. We pass on halacha l'maisa, yes. If you have a stainless steel pot that you did libun on, you've kashered it. Even if it only absorbed flavor through water, you can kasher it through fire. That'll work, right? Because effectively the mechanism is you are burning all the chametz that's in. So if you heat that pot to 900 degrees Fahrenheit, you have for sure destroyed any flavor that is inside of it. So what about our question with the grill? So the grill, those grates, let's assume that they were used for treif. We don't know if they were used for treif, but that's a suffix, right? And it's a suffix on a level of deraisa. We pass on suffix deraisa l'chumra. So it's not kosher, l'chumra. We don't know if it was used for treif, we don't know if it was used ever since last summer. Those grates have been used, let's say, suffix that they were used for treif. In order to kasher them, do we need libun or do we need hagala? Libun, right? You need libun. So the best way to do libun is to heat them up to 900 degrees Fahrenheit. Problem is that those grates don't get to 900 degrees Fahrenheit. They're not going to get that hot. How long does something have to be at 900 degrees Fahrenheit in order to be kosher? 1 second. Meaning if it gets to that point, we assume that everything inside of it is burnt off. However, there is a possibility of what's called libun kal, which is a lighter form of libun. That's what the Gemara defines the heat at which it will burn a piece of straw that touches to it. What exactly is the temperature at which something will be able to burn off a piece of straw that is touching it, right? Meaning it will be able to ignite a piece of straw that is touching it. So that's an interesting debate in the poskim, somewhere between 450, 550 degrees Fahrenheit. Pashtus is that is not an instantaneous measure, but it is a length of time. That's how Rebelski passes halacha l'maisa. You need about an hour at 550 or about 2 hours at 450 in order to achieve the requirement of libun kal. What'd you say?
This for grill.
Meaning this is for anything that you're going to do libun kal on, right? Libun kal in place of libun gomer. Ideally, you should do libun gomer, but, and this is another debate amongst the poskim, if the grill could only ever have gotten to the temperature of libun kal, so then do you need libun gomer? Ideally, yes, but if you can suffice it with, meaning if you can never get to that point, there's no self-cleaning oven available to be able to do that, to turn on the grill for 2 hours to the point that it is going to get hottest, meaning to preheat it and then have it burn out at whatever the hottest temperature that it is, ideally at 550 for an hour, that would be a good idea. The problem with the grills that we have here is that while they're good for cooking, there is a temperature gauge on there which is like a cheap component from China. You can't always trust the cheapo temperature gauge that's on the grill. So I turned it up to the hottest that it got, left it there for an hour, came back, and it read like 650, almost 700 degrees, which is, whoo, that's pretty good going. Labor Day. We could do this for an hour, it'd be great. I don't trust the temperature gauge. So I went to the kitchen and I spoke to Uzi, the chef, and I said to him, Uzi, do you have a meat thermometer, like something that's quality? He said, sure. So I borrowed his thermometer and I took it to the grate, and where the cheapo thermometer from China was telling me that this was at like 650, it was on the actual thermometer touching onto the grate itself, it was at about 490. So good thing to know that the temperature that it reads on the grill, they always want it to be calibrated a little bit higher so that you think you have a better quality grill. You can't always trust the grill to tell you the temperature. It's a good idea to get a thermometer to check the actual temperature of it. Meat thermometers are good because those are actually calibrated to tell you the temperature of things for real. If you can get one of those digital meat thermometers, those are usually quality, right? It gives you an instantaneous read. It will tell you exactly where you're up to. So we left that burning for 2 hours after it had been cleaned, right? Ideally, clean it, then kasher it. If you're doing libun gomer, you probably don't even need to clean it beforehand because it's going to burn everything. Libun kal, you want to make sure that everything that's stuck onto it is peeled off. And then at 450, for 2 hours, you can assume that everything that has been put on that is going to be kasher. It's going to be, taken care of. Yes?
You could do this even if they put like non-kosher meat on the ground?
Yeah, because any flavor that's in there is going to be destroyed. That's the point of doing kashering in general. Either libun or hagala is to remove flavor even of treifas. Yeah.
So let's say you have a pot, go back to the pots, and you accidentally put like meat into a dairy pot, but you actually like cook it like you're making chicken soup in there instead, and it's been cooked through oil, whatever. After that, was the only way to be able to kasher it through hagala in tub, like putting boiling water on top, or could you also just like, let's say, take it to a lake and then kasher it there?
So this is an excellent question. And it's important to point out that there is a difference between tovelling and kashering. They have two functions, both of them are mitzvahs midaraisa, requirements midaraisa. The purpose of kashering is to remove flavor. If there is a flavor that is inside of it, that is treif, meaning it is either something that is osir, or it is milchik, so it should be fleishik should be milchik, and you're trying to kash it to parav. We can get to that detail in a moment. In order to remove flavor, you need to remove it through the medium that the flavor was imparted. Tovelling, only ever happens once in the life of a kli, and that is when it is purchased from a non-Jew. And that is even if it is brand new and has never been used, doesn't have any flavor in it whatsoever. Or even if it is kosher, and then you sold it to a non-Jew and bought it back 1 second later from a non-Jew, you then need to tovel it. And the Ran writes that the reason that we tovel the kelim is like a gear, it's like a conversion for those kelim, in order to be able to be used for Jewish food. It is nothing to do with kashrus. Toveling and kashering are two separate things altogether. Separate details in halacha completely. It is often I get questions a lot. Rabbi, do I need to tovel this? And they mean, do I need to kasher it? And sometimes people, do I need to kasher it? And they mean, do I need to tovel it? There are two separate areas of halacha. Kashering applies to something that you are removing flavor from. Toveling is something that you are converting to be able to use for Jewish purposes. And that's true even if you are never planning on using it for anything hot at all. For example, a wine glass. A brand new wine glass has to be toveled. Doesn't need to be kashered. It's brand new. Yeah.
So anything new just has to be toveled.
Yes. Anything new that is made out of metal, midreshet, or glass, midrabanan. And there's a whole list of like all of the synthetic things that might or might not need toveling. Plastic does not need to be toveled, and earthenware does not need to be toveled. And wood does not need to be toveled. Those don't need to be toveled. Metal and glass do need to be toveled. Glass midrabanan, metal's midreshet. The reason that glass midrabanan is because glass didn't exist in the days of the Mishnah, right? They didn't have, meaning the Torah describes earthenware, woodware, metalware, and stoneware. There's no glass in the Torah. Yeah.
So if you bought a new pot from a Jew, what would you do?
If it was toveled before, and you bought it from a Jew,
you don't know.
if you don't know, then you should tovel it. If it was made by a Jew, then it doesn't need to be toveled. It's made by a Jew. What'd you say?
It's made in Israel.
So if it's made in Israel, oftentimes it will have a line on it that says "Ein tzarich tefillah." Yeah.
What were you saying? You were saying about the sinks. So you're not able to use a sink when you go to an Airbnb?
If you go to an Airbnb on Pesach, you cannot kasher the sink at all.
Like, can you use it to wash your hands?
You can use it to wash your hands, sure, but you can't kasher it. Meaning you can't use it for any of your kelim. You could use it with cold water, because that's not going to impart any flavor whatsoever. With cold water, 100%, yeah. Not recommended, just because people are going to get weird about it, but mikra din, yeah, if it's cold water, there's nothing to be concerned with.
But in oven, you can wash it for Pesach.
Correct. Now, if you go to an Airbnb during the week, meaning any time the rest of the year, you could kasher the sink, wait 24 hours since the last time that it was used.
How do you just fill it with hot water?
So boil a kettle, right? Pour boiling water over the sink.
Can you use the counters on Pesach?
So the counters so bless you. If you got there before Pesach, you can kasher it with boiling water or cover it. Halacha Pesach or halacha in general for kashrus, anything that is covered does not need to be kashered. Anything that is kashered does not need to be covered. Right?
Wait, why if you got there before Pesach, you could kosher the
You can kasher the countertop with boiling water because that's before Pesach. It uses bittul. You can be mevatel chametz before Pesach. You can't be mevatel chametz on Pesach. Right? Meaning kashering with boiling water the mechanism is bittul, nullifying the chametz, nullifying the flavor. Always. You can do that before Pesach. You can't do it on Pesach. Yeah.
Wait, if you kosher a sink before Pesach, does it apply?
Yeah. It's only if you get there on Pesach that you can't kasher it. But before Pesach, you can absolutely kasher it. Right? So long as it's before midday on Erev Pesach, because the Isur Chametz kicks in Chatzos. Well, an hour before Chatzos Midrabanan, on Erev Pesach. You can be mevatel chametz before, and that's why you burn your chametz and say the kol chamira before midday on Erev Pesach. You can be mevatel chametz Erev Pesach, no problem. Everybody with me on that? Tovelling and kashering, two separate things. What time did we finish? 10 minutes. Okay, so let's finish off this point. We can get to halachas of tovelling as well, probably not today, but tovelling is a separate requirement from kashering in general. And I'll give you the extremity of this. Sometimes, and you see this from time to time, that people decide that they are going to be machmir when they sell their chametz for Pesach. They're going to sell all of their chametz pots and pans for Pesach. That is a terrible idea. Why? Because when you buy it back from the non-Jew after Pesach, now you need to tovel all of your pots and pans. Because they were owned by a non-Jew, and now you bought them. They stayed in your cupboard. They were not used by anybody for 8 days, 9 days, whatever. But they were owned by a non-Jew, and now you bought them from a non-Jew. Now they need to be toveled before you use them. That is not kashering at all. It's a question of toveling. Don't sell your pots and pans for Pesach. Bad idea, right? Yeah. You sell chametz. Don't sell the pots and pans. Yeah, there are people that have this mishugas that they should sell their pots and pans because the flavor of the chametz that's inside of the pots and pans. That's not anything that you need to be worried about, because that's for sure less than a kazayis of chametz, right? The flavor is molecules, right? You're worried about imparting that flavor onto your food, but there's no issur of owning the flavor of chametz. There's a prohibition of eating something that has the flavor of chametz or owning chametz. But owning flavor of chametz in the walls of your pot, there's no prohibition. Yeah.
Do you do kosher hot water or hot water?
It's a great question. Most of the time, the hot water urn does not need to be kashered. What does need to be kashered is the spout, the spigot, the thing that the hot water comes out of.
Because usually the urn is already kosher.
The pre-tovel, you're saying? Yeah.
So like you don't really like
So you don't need to tovel it, but if it's used for chametz, you would need to kasher it. Meaning the spigot you need to kasher. Why? Because you see all these kids walking around with those noodle soups. How do you make a noodle soup? Put it under the hot water and you turn on the water. What happens is you have boiling hot water that's hitting chametz, that's steaming up, and you have the flavor of chametz that's hitting the spout.
How do you just kosher the spout alone?
So super easy. You wait 24 hours and then you take a kettle and pour boiling water over the spout. Right?
Yeah.
That's the same way, by the way, and this is a good trick to know. Whenever you are kashering a sink, so you also need to kasher the faucet. How do you kasher a faucet? So usually you have like those faucet things that pull down with like the shower head thing that you pull down. The easiest way to do it is you boil a kettle, and then you take your spout and dip it in the kettle. Ching, kashered. And then you can pour out the boiling water that is now boiling in your kettle, but just dip it in there. You've kashered. Yeah.
If you go to a Pesach program, can you assume that the kettle that they give you and like everything is kosher?
In the hotel? I mean, it depends on the hotel, but you can assume so if somebody has said so. Otherwise, you ask the mashgiach at the hotel, is this thing kosher? In general, when you go to like hotels and Airbnbs and they give you coffee machines, most of the time you can assume that the coffee machine is kosher. Meaning, if it's a Keurig, I always recommend like run a clean cycle through it with boiling water 2 or 3 times, and then you can probably be sure that it's kosher. You do have sometimes you have the Keurigs that are like soup Keurigs, but most people it's not rov teshmisha, but like meaning most of the time you don't have that. And most of the flavored Keurigs all have a hefsher anyway. Not necessarily kosher to Pesach, but they all have an OU on like the flavored stuff. But if you run through the Keurig 2 or 3 times, that's fine. Depending on the hotel that you go to, if they have like a drip coffee thing that's in like the glass thingy, so those things I'm always very nervous about, because I see all these hacks online of like people like poaching salmon or boiling hot dogs or making boiled eggs in like the coffee machine in the hotel. I'm always nervous about those things because I think people use them for all sorts of fantastic and weird and wonderful things. I'm always nervous about that. Yeah, meaning if it's a high-end hotel, you probably don't need to be worried about that. But like if you're gonna, I don't know, like a Holiday Inn or a Best Western, like my guess is that like some college kids have stayed in that room recently and used it to make hot dogs. Yeah.
So if you use a utensil for, let's say, meat and then a davar charif and then dairy, and now it's treif, so how would you kosher it if it's not stainless steel, so it would melt if you put it in an oven? That was
What utensil are we talking about?
anything. I guess a knife.
So let's say you have a knife that is dairy, yeah? Dairy knife that you accidentally used to cut up your steak. Yes?
Yeah, but you used it. Does using it for like an onion in between make it?
So onions is a separate question. We can get to questions about onions, probably not today. Davar charif is a unique case. In general, in order to transfer flavor, the rule is you either need direct heat or a liquid medium. There is a unique din with regards to davar charif, which is that if you have 2 other ingredients, which is called duchta de sakina, the pressure of the knife, and davar charif, that those 2 things could release flavor. So if I have a knife that is fleshik, that I then cut an onion with, so it's cold. Everything is cold. There's no liquid medium. There's no heat, right? There's no hot water. There's no direct heat. The pressure of the knife and the sharpness of the onion will draw out the flavor and make that onion into a fleshik onion, right? That is, it's not going to be more fleshik than if I cooked it with meat. So duchta de sakina is going to make an onion fleshik. Or alternatively, if I cut an onion with a fleshik knife and then I cut it with a parov knife, it could make the knife fleshik from the onion, because it'd be like cutting a piece of meat. But if I trafed up a knife, so the best way to deal with that is to pour boiling water over it, right? Meaning, the sakina is definitely not anything more than boiling water. right? It's definitely no more than if I put it into a chopping pot with boiling chop, right?
Yeah.
It's not going to be more than that. It's not direct heat, right?
Yeah.
So that would be the way to kasher it. Yeah.
Also, does Bishul Akum require you to do tefillah or anything?
If a non-Jew cooked your, meaning made pasta for you,
Yeah.
it does not require tevilah. It might require kashering. And that's a big discussion. If Bishul Akum requires kashering, halacha l'maisa, lechatchila, yes. Meaning if your housekeeper made pasta for your younger sibling from beginning to end in the pot, so that's Bishul Akum. They shouldn't be doing that, and you shouldn't be eating that.
Why does it require kashering?
So because Bishul Akum is non-kosher midrabanan, meaning it's an issur d'Rabbanan to eat. What's that? If you turn on the fire for Ashkenazim, Ashkenazim make that Bishul Akum is dealt with by any involvement in the cooking process. Sfardim are much more machmir. Any Sfardim here? So Sfardim are much more machmir when it comes to Bishul Akum. My Sfardi chaverim have a hard time eating in restaurants because most of the time the chef is not necessarily Jewish. The mashgiach is Jewish. He turns on the fire. That's good for Ashkenazim, not good for Sfardim. Sfardim are much more machmir when it comes to Bishul Akum. It's also worth pointing out. Hey, we'll just leave you with this point. It's also worth pointing out that Bishul Akum meaning a Jewish involvement to remove Bishul Akum means a Jew is involved in the cooking process. In the cooking process. No worries. It's a Jew is involved in the cooking process, not in the preparatory process. Sometimes it happens that you'll have somebody, I get the shaila. A woman calls me up and says, Rabbi, my husband told me that this is Bishul Akum. I don't understand. I cut the vegetables. I deboned the chicken. I made the whole thing. I put it in the thing. And then I told the housekeeper, at 7 p.m., turn on the oven, preheat it to 350 and put the casserole in. I did everything. All that she did was turn on the oven and put it in. That's Bishul Akum. Because there's zero cooking that was done by a Jew. The cooking was entirely done by a non-Jew from beginning to end. Entirely. That's called Bishul Akum. Even though the Jewish woman did everything else, that's Bishul Akum. You need to do something in order to get rid of the Bishul Akum. Even stirring it, right? Taking it out, checking it, moving it around, putting it back in. Something in the cooking process will remove the status of Bishul Akum. According to Ashkenazim. For Sfardim, it has to be the majority of the cooking done by a Jew. Last question, and then we'll finish up. Yeah.
So let's say, for Bishul Akum, if somebody, let's say if I were to prepare the food and then they cook it, but I obviously turn on the oven and the stove, but they're just doing the process of actually cooking it, I cut up stuff before, that would be okay?
Cutting up stuff before is irrelevant.
Oh, it's only during the actual
In the actual cooking process, either that you turned on the fire, you stirred the pot, you put it in the oven, something in the actual cooking, meaning it's raw and then it's cooked. Sometime between it being raw and being cooked, Jewish involvement in it, the Rama writes, even if you flick one twig into the fire, like a wood chip into the fire, it increases the fire. Something in the cooking process from raw to cooked will remove the status of Bishul Akum for Ashkenazim. For Sfardim, you need a lot more in order to remove that status of Bishul Akum. All right, ladies, to be continued.
Thank you.
A beautiful day. Yeah, for 10.